There you're going to get a transcript of this entire show, plus access to clips and stuff we simply cannot do anymore on the radio. And that's our newsletter at CarrieHarrison.com. Well, we're all living through the part of the empire's story where it stops pretending it's the hero and starts auditioning for the villain role. At least this would be the opinion of, as they say, many people out there. Mustache optional, drones included. Year one of his imperial kumquat's second act was domestic thuggery, a slow, sticky, bureaucratic mugging of the Constitution in broad daylight, with our leadership standing around like mall cops, arguing over whose radio battery died first. Year number two, now the swagger goes international. Why settle for bullying your own institutions when you can expand the brand and start shaking down the whole hemisphere? And that's the pitch now, isn't it? Venezuela is in our backyard. And apparently in Washington, D.C., backyard means you own it. Like a dog that's found a bone and is prepared to bite God himself over possession rights. We didn't like the guy in charge, so poof, there goes the old post-war pretense that borders matter and war is something you only do when you're attacked or authorized, not when you're annoyed. And here's the part you're supposed to swallow without gagging. If the United States can treat another country like a misbehaving rental property, then every other strong man on earth gets a shiny new permission slip. You don't have to love Putin to see the sales pitch. If Washington gets to stabilize its neighborhood with force, why can't I stabilize mine? Same for Xi, same for Netanyahu. The whole planet becomes one big HOA run by men who settle disputes by lighting your house on fire and calling it maintenance. Remember the post-World War II order, the one that built, at least on paper, to stop exactly this kind of might makes right territorial bullying. It was supposed to be the great human compromise. No more empires carving up the map because they felt entitled. No more spheres of influence where the strong ate the weak and called it geography. Well, that order is getting replaced with something older, maybe a little uglier to some, to many, and much more honest, the pre-World War II model where thugs drew circles on a globe and say, mine! Not a rules-based system, more like a bar fight with flags. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. I went to a boarding school with a Habsburg. He didn't have any memory of his family's good deeds for 600 years, but he certainly had the attitude. For decades, Washington, D.C. kept up a glossy moral cover story, right? Democracy, alliances, freedom, humanitarian concern, soft power, that whole sermon. And sure, the sermon was frequently accompanied by coups and friendly dictators and the occasional misunderstanding involving napalm, but the packaging mattered. It gave the empire a patina, thin but shiny. And shiny enough to sell itself as a necessary force for order. And now, well, that mask is falling off and landing face first in the oil. Because listen to the new gospel. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies go in, spend billions to fix the infrastructure and start making money for the country. That sounds adorable. It's the kind of sentence a pickpocket says while you're still applauding his concern for your financial wellness. Making money for the country. It's a bedtime story. The grown-up translation is they'll make money for themselves, and the country is just the stage scenery and footing the bill, by the way, you, the taxpayer. And once you accept the logic, once you normalize, we can run your nation because we've got the hardware and you've got the resources, you've officially entered the world where tyrants thrive. It's not democracy versus authoritarianism anymore. It's competing protection rackets, each with its own flag, its own propaganda, and its own list of neighbors who'd better behave. That's the nightmare on offer. 3 big blocks, 3 big bosses, 3 big excuses. 1 block under Putin's boot, one under G's and one under really stable genius, with assorted junior thugs playing regional assistant managers. In this model, being someone's neighbor means you either comply with the neighbor's wishes or you get managed. Sovereignty becomes a subscription plan. Pay monthly in obedience or enjoy the deluxe package of sanctions, destabilization, and helpful missiles. And if this sounds new, it's only because the marketing department refreshed the logo. This is, in fact, the Monroe Doctrine with a modern haircut. The original version back in 1823 was a polite little throat clear dressed up as a moral principle. Europe, keep your hands off the Americas. It was charming, like a raccoon slapping a bear and declaring the forest a raccoon-only zone. James Monroe, president, delivered it with calm confidence, the confidence of a man standing behind the British Navy and pretending it was his own muscle. Britain did the heavy lifting. America wrote the press release. The pitch was noble. The subtext was territorial. The translation was, we're not strong enough to police this hemisphere yet, but we're calling dibs. Geopolitical puberty. Awkward, loud, and convinced the future owes it something. And then America grew up. It found muscles, it discovered gunboats, and it learned that phrases like regional stability can lubricate almost anything. The doctrine stopped being a statement and became a hall pass. It didn't stop empire as much as replace European empire with an American franchise. Same extraction, new management, better pamphlets. Then came the Roosevelt corollary, which I was not taught in school. You probably weren't either, but you should have been. They probably just referred to Teddy Roosevelt or TR riding horseback. The Monroe Doctrine on steroids was the Roosevelt corollary, barging into the room without knocking. Suddenly, intervention wasn't a last resort, it was the default setting. We'll intervene proactively, said the country inventing lynching and child labor, because we're the adult in the room. Imperialism in khakis, paternalism with a gun, democracy delivered at bayonet point. And the genius, if you can call it that, was the plausible innocence. Every intervention was framed as reluctant. Every occupation was temporary. Every catastrophe was unforeseen. And every time it blew up, the blame was assigned to the locals. Corruption, culture, their historical baggage. Washington, D.C. just showed up with tanks and advice. Totally different. By the Cold War, the doctrine became a hemispheric anxiety disorder. Any election that went left was a plot. And when I say left, I mean the opposite of right. Any reform that touched land or wealth was a threat. Coups bloomed like mold in a damp basement. Dictators got installed, funded, trained, and occasionally replaced when they stopped returning calls. And through all of it, America insisted it wasn't an empire, because empires are European, and America is a guardian, a partner, a friend, who sometimes needs to slap you around for your own good. Now, the doctrine hasn't died, the Monroe Doctrine. It's just updated its wardrobe. It learned to say human rights with a straight face. It hired consultants. It stopped calling invasions, and started calling them missions. Same racket, smoother fonts. So that's where we are today. Watching a superpower revive its oldest habit, declare the neighborhood ours, treat other nations like misbehaving possessions, and act shocked when every other authoritarian on earth takes notes. Because the kumquat world order doesn't make the world safe for democracy. It makes the world safe for tyrants by turning tyranny into a bipartisan, multinational, market-tested operating system. Now, ask yourself, if this is the backyard logic in the open, what happens when Washington decides your street needs stabilizing too? Well, go to Minneapolis, perhaps, for that answer. This brings us to the domestic clown car. the opposition party, the one that keeps promising to save democracy, and it can't even manage the radical act of appearing awake. Author and activist Norman Solomon has been saying the quiet part out loud, that Democratic leadership has grown so uninspiring, so disconnected, it's like watching a fire department debate font choices while the building collapses. Or on Democracy Now! Recently, he argued that we've been marching toward a fascistic politics because corporate Democrats keep failing to beat the GOP or offer policies that feel like they were designed for humans. So today, we're going to do something unfashionable. We're going to treat this like it matters, because once Washington, D.C. gets comfortable abducting foreign leaders and talking like it's running a petrostate, the human toll doesn't stay overseas. It comes home in the language. It comes home in new laws. It comes home in budgets. It comes home in the policing and the casual assumption that power is whatever the guy with the missiles says it is. Norman Solomon is here with his latest book, The Blue Road to Trump Hell. His book scrutinizes how the behavior of many Democrats assisted Trump's electoral triumphs. That scrutiny is important not only for clarity about the past, it also makes possible a focus on the way that such failures can be avoided in the future. Let's talk about how the empire sells itself abroad and at home. Norman Solomon, I want to welcome you to the Carrie Harrison Files.
Well, thanks. And as you say, what goes around comes around. The idea that the U.S. can have foreign policy, dress it up as being benign and beneficent to the world, and then the militarism isn't going to come back home, that never works. And so we're seeing now the consequence of failure to challenge what Martin Luther King Jr. called the madness of militarism. The madness was always there. It was bipartisan. Now we know it's even worse. Hard to believe, but even worse under the current administration.
Norman Solomon, if this is not expected to become prolonged and substantial, I quote, who decides that it is not expected to become prolonged and substantial? The same people ordering the strikes? And what happens when short and limited becomes a year-long presence with oil security expectations?
Well, when the head of the regime, we're supposed to say administration, when the head of the regime decides XYZ on a whim, we've gotten to the point where it's a virtual dictatorship because a fascistic party controls two of the three branches of government and most of the third. When you get to the top of the judicial branch, it is, with rare exceptions, simply saluting to the commander-in-chief, which, as we learned in civics class, is not the way it's supposed to work. I think, Carrie, that you very aptly, in just a few minutes, summarized the history of U.S. foreign policy and the really appalling, horrific, and extremely dangerous reality is that as bad as foreign policy has been, from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq to Libya to missile strikes on Africa and the Middle East, consistently from both administrations, Republican and Democrat, now much worse. And the mask that has fallen means that the mask is no longer there to even restrain, to some degree, the absolute militaristic whim of one guy sitting behind the decision desk in the Oval Office. And the reason I've written this new book, which, by the way, is free to everybody at blueroad.info online, that's just blueroad.info, is that we have to ask ourselves, I think it's crucial to ask ourselves now, how did we get into Trump hell and how do we get out of it? And there is no way around the reality that the Democratic Party from the very top has served from the top as an enabler of the Trump regime. And we have to change the Democratic Party if we have any realistic, and I emphasize realistic, hope of turning this around by taking the Congress and the White House away from the fascists.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? Well, you call low-cost airlines because they specialize in cheap flights, in discount hotel rooms, in cheap car rentals, and with the best price guarantee. Often 75% off. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795.
That's a very interesting prescription, Norman Solomon, because people are going to want to know, well, how do we do it? I think a lot of people probably think it's a great idea. If Congress can't stop this because the House blocks it or a veto dares them to find 2/3, what is the plan B for regular citizens who don't want their democracy run like an oil company's security detail?
Yeah, well, the plan B, I think, is to build social movements that are independent of the electoral system, but deal with and defeat the way that the electoral system has functioned. I think we've learned by now that we can't simply say it doesn't matter who's in office in the White House or in Congress. That's an absurd attitude. And yet we have perhaps thought at times, hey, if we just have enough people in the streets and we organize well, we have enough effective emails and so forth, that is going to do it. It's not. It matters, obviously. It's hidden in plain sight. It should have never been hidden. It is crucial who is president, who is running Congress. And that means that, and this is real, the Democratic Party is in federal elections the only way to stop this extreme fascistic Republican Party. And that means fight like hell. Fight inside the California Democratic Party. Fight like hell inside the Democratic National Committee. And challenge, stop being so nice to your congressperson out there in Los Angeles or New York or anywhere else. Stop being so nice because they vote well some of the time. It's not acceptable to us. They have 1,000 or more district offices from the U.S. House of Representatives. They are sitting ducks for nonviolent militancy to confront their militarism and also to confront their failure to really challenge the Republican Party as it does its worst, the worst even in our lifetimes. And so that's where this book, theblueroad.info, says it matters how we got here because that can tell us how to get out of here. And how we got in here is deference to the Democratic Party and saying, well, I like my congressperson, has a D after his or her name. They say good things. No, that's not enough. And being a neoliberal party and being a party that will nominate someone like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris for president, that is unacceptable. We need genuine populists. We have to recognize, based on history, which after all should matter, it's how we got here, we've got to recognize that when you try to defeat or say you try to defeat the right-wing, xenophobic, racist, fascistic Republican Party with milquetoast, middle-of-the-road, neoliberal, can't we all get along, Democratic nominees, it's not going to work. You can't defeat really phony populism with a different brand of phony populism.
Carrie Harrison with you. This is the Carrie Harrison Files. We're talking right now to Norman Solomon. You'll remember and recognize his name. We've had him on many times. His book, also, we're going to include in our newsletter. When you sign up at carrieharrison.com, you can also go to the website that we're mentioning, but I'll make sure that you get a copy of it. Everybody gets a copy of it. His latest book, The Blue Road to Trump Hell, scrutinizing how the behavior of many Democrats assisted Trump's electoral triumphs. That scrutiny is important not only for clarity about the past, it also makes possible a focus on ways that such failures can be avoided in the future. Live streaming right now on YouTube and Substack. Simply Google Carrie Harrison Substack or Carrie Harrison YouTube. Also, we're going to pick it up and live stream on Instagram. Coming up for the phone call portion in about a half hour. We're talking to Norman about what regular people can do and why the Democratic Party, and this is central to his argument, has been asleep at the wheel. I mean, people have been asking for years, like, when is it going to grow a spine? But there's a reason it won't grow a spine. And Norman, you have eyes in on this. Like, it could actually, could actually do something and act like an opposition party, but it prefers not to. What's your assessment on that?
Yeah, in some real sense, the people in office with a Democratic name after their name will grow a spine to the extent that we grow a spine. And I'm not talking about third party here. I'm really not, because when you look at federal elections, you find that in 40 years, the Green Party, with all their good intentions, never came close once to electing someone to Congress, whereas we do have Ilhan Omar, we have Rashida Tlaib, we have Anna Presley, we have Ro Khanna, we have people who are ready, willing, and able, and do fight for righteous causes. And so we have an opportunity now to say, okay, if the Democratic Party leadership, and I put that in scare quotes, I mean, who has been inspired by Hakeem Jeffries or Chuck Schumer? I'd like to meet that person. I'm not sure that person really exists. But if we're going to fight for a real Democratic, lowercase d Democratic Party, then we have to grow a spine. We have to be willing to confront these fakers like the two senators from the state of California who are militarists, who never really met a war that they didn't like if it had the red, white, and blue plastered on it, unless maybe they can get some kind of partisan rhetorical advantage against a Republican in the White House. So we have to be much more willing to challenge. You know, it's really astonishing to me, Carrie, that we have, as I mentioned, more than 1,000 congressional offices around the country, often conveniently within a few minutes' ride from where we live. How often have we seen picket signs and picket lines up around these offices, even though they're mostly inhabited by Democrats, certainly in this state of California, Democrats who are aiding and abetting the militarization of this country and failing to sufficiently, for instance, demand and fight for the abolition of ICE.
Norman Solomon, if the backyard doctrine is back, what's your read on the Monroe Doctrine? We'll call it cosplay. Why not? Is this policy or a political drug that makes presidents feel 10 feet tall and immortal with 18-year-old bodies like the current president? How do we detox? I'm so sorry about my sarcasm. I can't go more than like 3 seconds without it. How do we detox a country addicted to hemispheric management?
Well, part of the problem, of course, is the psychological pathology of the guy in the Oval Office right now. But as you pointed out at the top of the hour, this has been systemic for so long, and it's a matter of degree. I can only say the word Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq, and it's clear that this has been a bipartisan problem. But now it's much, much worse because the sense of impunity has become so much more extreme. And so the mask is off, and that is more candid. But it's even worse when you look at what's happening right now and has in the last week or so in Venezuela, the threat to Greenland, really a threat to Cuba as well, and Iran and elsewhere. And there is an underlying reality that now the Monroe Doctrine is not good enough for the people running the US government. They want both hemispheres. And so we've had this attitude, and this is bipartisan, that, hey, what are those Chinese ships doing in the South China Sea? And we have to forget why the South China Sea has its middle name. It's like, what is China doing in China is almost the message. And so this is the imperial attitude to the nth degree. And so we need the anti-imperial attitude to the nth degree. And that's sort of gets back to my point here. I thought of the name of the book, The Blue Road to Trump Hell, because the Blue Road, the Democratic highway, did lead us to this reality now. And it is a fascistic reality, as we're seeing every day, coming out of the Trump regime. So if we're going to defeat that regime in November, and if we're going to organize a social movement that propels the defeat of the GOP, then we need an attitude shift, which I think says, A, history matters, and we're not going to accept, we're going to challenge the current leadership of the Democratic Party, and D, we're going to give up these fantasies that it doesn't matter who wins these elections. It matters who wins these elections, and we have to defeat those Republicans. And the only way to do that is with Democrats.
Thank you, Norman Solomon. Thank you so much for joining us today. Your latest book is called The Blue Road to Trump Hell. It's free and for fun in our own little intellectual way. Give us the website again where people can find it.
Yeah, absolutely free for everybody listening to Carrie Harrison File. You can simply go to the web and you type in blueroad.info. That's blueroad.info. The free book awaits you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll make sure that that's also embedded in our newsletter when you sign up at carrieharrison.com. Norman Solomon's book scrutinizes how the behavior of many Democrats assisted Trump's electoral triumphs. And that scrutiny is, of course, important not only for clarity about the past, but making possible a focus on ways that such failures could be avoided in the future, something everyone seems to want. Carrie Harrison with you. This is the Carrie Harrison Files. Coming up, we're going to open up the phones because right now Washington, D.C. is trying to sell you a war like it's a cleaning product. Hemispheric hygiene. Yeah, for real. That's what they're calling it. Like bombings and kidnappings are just springtime scrubbing, and the hemisphere is a filthy bathroom in need of bleach. So here's your cue. Call in and tell me where the line is. Is this war, no matter what they label it or what they slap on it, is this a war? Do you want Congress to authorize it? Or do you want Congress to stop it? Or do you want to keep Congress hiding behind procedure? And what happens when backyard policy becomes the new global permission slip for every thug with a map and a grudge? You've got an opinion, you've got a phone. Use both, because if you don't, our leadership will interpret your silence as a standing ovation. What do you call what's happening right now, and what should be done about it? 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Those are your Harrison hotlines. Back in a flash.
This pussy grabs back. The Carrie Harrison Files. CarrieHarrison.com.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, call now and get free shipping of your new CGM, plus we'll bill your insurance for you.
877-282-8102. That's 877-282-8102. 877-282-8102. 877-282-8102.
Everybody wants cheap airfare, but where do you find it? Well, you call low-cost airlines because they specialize in cheap flights, in discount hotel rooms, in cheap car rentals, and with the best price guarantee. Often 75% off. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795. 901-235-1795.